we are a supportive function in many regards, and we need to really enable our team to be such a support to the folks that are out there on the front line. My story into RevOps, I think, like most people, kind of happened by accident, right? I started out
Okay.
in sort of the sales world. I was
Yeah.
the SDR, BDR, whatever acronym you'd like to use, where I was pounding the phones all day long, and learned fairly quickly after about a year and a half, 2 years, that doing sales wasn't really in my DNA, and I found a lot more enjoyment in helping those that are in sales. So like being that sort of supportive member, but also like I really enjoyed getting my hands deep in data. So it's about 15 years or so where I made that switch into sales operations at the time, and just kind of honed in my craft from there, learning all the different tools and systems that are needed in order to make a sales organization or go-to-market organization much more effective, and just kind of planted some firm roots there, and really expanded my skill set and knowledge. And that's kind of like where I've been. Like I've spanned across multiple industries, organizations, both large and small, and yeah, I'm very mission driven to help revenue teams operate a lot more efficiently.
Awesome. So you mentioned there you were previously an SDR kind of salesperson.
Mhm.
How do you find that has aided you in your kind of role now as a RevOps person when you're kind of having chats with SDRs and reps? How do you feel like that has aided what you currently do?
Sure. I think it's really helped me build a lot of empathy
Nice. Okay.
to the role itself, right? So like not only that, but also understanding the trials and tribulations that they go through, and finding ways to make their job sting a little bit less. Like let's be honest, being an SDR is a really tough job. Some would argue the hardest in any sort of sales organization. So giving them tools, giving them data, giving them knowledge to make their jobs operate much more seamlessly, I think really gives you some wins there. So like having that empathy, being in their shoes before, has certainly really helped me work with those sorts of organizations before.
Awesome. So you mentioned there it helps you have empathy, and you can kind of provide them with the data then that will allow them to perform at a good rate. Like, how do you what do you kind of one-to-ones look like with other reps, or how does like the RevOps team fit in with the rep side of things?
Sure. So where we are today, my one-to-ones tend to happen more with like the managers or leaders of those groups.
Okay.
However, there are many instances, and even someone on my team holds office hours for the SDRs, where like it's an open block of hours where each of the SDRs will meet with them on the ops side, one to one, and talk through like some of their current challenges, or like they're getting confused on this particular process or how to use this particular tool. So like there's a standing time block, and they knew that they had that available at their fingertips, where they could reach out and have that face-to-face, well, virtual face-to-face time with someone on the operations team. And I think that's really helped build the collaborative aspect that we really need to be in this sort of role. Like we are a supportive function in many regards, and we need to really enable our team to be such a support to the folks that are out there on the front line.
Nice. I like that the office hours. I really like that. I think that's a cool way of doing things. So your reps will have their managers that I guess they have guaranteed one-to-one scheduled sit downs, maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, etc. And then there's actual times where they can kind of go to the RevOps side of things as well and get a kind of different outlook on things. Is that how it typically goes?
Yeah, absolutely. And
Nice.
obviously that won't work in organizations that are very large. Like right now
Yes.
we have a team about 8 SDRs, so it's very manageable. If we were to double that, we would be approaching where like, I mean, this is not sustainable sort of thing, and we would sort of need to readjust or move it from one to one to like a 1 to 3 type of environment where it's still small groups. It's very intimate, but supporting one-to-one at a certain scale just is not something that could be supported.
Yeah, very true. I guess, that's the difficulty with scaling. It's difficult as you grow, right? You're not going to be able to have that, but whilst you're the size you are, it's a really good idea. So paint me a picture of how rep one-to-ones are different between the rep one-to-ones with managers and rep one-to-ones with the RevOps side of the company.
Mm. Yeah, so with the managers, there is a lot more strategy that's involved in terms of identifying certain challenges as they relate to, let's say, a business goal. So like meeting with the managers is like I mentioned, like strategizing, like identifying what the key areas for improvement are, reviewing numbers and rep performance, like when you drill down into like activity metrics, which is something that everybody loves to do. That would be done at like the one-to-one manager level,
Okay.
as well as what do these activity numbers, or like what is the impact, or what are we seeing as an output from these inputs that we're getting from your team, and how
Okay.
that relates to like different strategic decisions that we might need to make. With the RevOps team to the individual contributors, it's more of like how do we execute sort of thing. Like this is the plan for this particular time period. We're either experimenting with this sort of sales play, or we're providing you with this sort of tool. Here's kind of what the expectation is in terms of what our output's going to be, but more importantly, here's how it helps you. This is how you use it, sort of thing. And if there's any trouble, then we have, of course, the office hours to dig in further with that.
Nice. I like that a lot. That's a pretty refreshing way of looking at things, actually. That's great. So on that then, what are the kind of the ground what groundwork is required to guarantee the successful adoption of new processes?
Yeah, that's an interesting question too, right? And it's almost like, and how you initially phrased the question, right? How do we get reps to adopt a new process is an interesting one.
Yeah.
And the answer I'd give is like, I mean, just toss money at them. I mean, that's how you do it. So this has been great, Theo. Have a great day. No, I'm just kidding. The answer isn't always money, but like how I would approach that is kind of reframing the challenge of it. It's less about getting reps to adopt a new process, and like I would frame it as, how does operations build something that reps are going to want? When you think about like how you sell something, there's oftentimes like a value sell, or a value add that a salesperson would reach out to with a prospect for. And operations isn't too different, at least what I would say. So when we are rolling out a new process to a sales organization, the guiding principle traditionally has been like focus on the WIFM, the acronym, what's in it for me. But I think that is a bit dated at this point. So like while you need to keep their interests and needs in mind, it's got to be more than that. It's got to be something that they want. So if you
Okay.
could sell them the value on this new process, you can say, hey, we are adjusting this, and here's the data to support why we're changing this process. And by the way, here's how this new process will make your life easier because this is what you asked for, sort of thing. And that's like kind of like the important thing. So like through the office hours and like through other meetings, we're continuing to gather feedback. And you ask any operations professional, and they'll probably say something to the effect that like, oh, these sales reps are always complaining about X, Y, and Z, and like how it's annoying, but actually it's valuable information because they're identifying their pain, right? It's the stuff that they go through, and not everything you could fix. But if you are able to build a new process that solves that pain and give it right back to them, that like, hey, we had trouble doing this. This is what we heard from you. So here we have this new process, or here we are able to build competitive battle cards based on the information that you have put in our system. Like, here's a tool for you. Does this seem like it's something that would be useful? And get them to the yes. And that usually helps with the adoption of a new process.
That's so interesting. So it's like you're kind of doing exactly what a rep would do to a prospect. You that there needs to be that at least like one kind of killer value thing from it for them, right? Like what can you do for me? Like you said, what impact can this have on mine? And when they see that, do you find the smaller the maybe this question answers itself. The smaller the team, the easier it is to get that successful process adoption, or
Sure.
like, yeah,
Yeah, so I think I see where you're heading with this. So like the smaller the team, the more time or like the more potential face time you could have in training them or
yes,
onboarding them to adopt it. I would say, or I would argue that's not always the case, right? So like
okay,
when I first started in my current role, the sales team was very small. But adopting new processes was a ginormous challenge because we had seasoned sales reps here at this company that have been here for many years longer than I had. And here's this new person trying to come in, trying to change things up and give us something new. And it was extremely challenging because I didn't go at it with not only the what's in it for me, but like not even spending enough time to hear like what some of the challenges are. It was more like, hey, I'm data focused. I need to gather this data thing so I could provide some sort of insights or strategic decisions. And I wasn't getting it, so I tried tossing out a new process, and it did not go well at all. Quite honest with
really,
you, even though it was a very small team. And you're not always going to be able to have that value add for a new process. In certain cases, you kind of have to I don't know how to gently put this, but like build it in a way that forces them to follow a new process.
yes,
Uh, like if we think about our tools and our systems for, let's say, Salesforce as an example,
yeah,
a common one is like requiring a contact role on an opportunity. There's a way that you can force that to happen by only having the new opportunity button on a contact record, and by nature that will put it in. Like, so there are going to be instances where you sort of have to force the adoption to happen based on the systems that are provided. But that's kind of like I try to reserve that for only unique cases, and that I couldn't tie a strong value add to like what the needs are from my end, or like from the request from the executive team.
okay, interesting. I've got you. Yeah, I mean, I guess if you have good reps, then they'll see the value in it, no matter how difficult or maybe tedious it may be. Like Salesforce admin can be quite tedious, but it's a necessity, right?
Sure.
So yeah, that's great. So how important on that then? How important is it to have like a champion that really it can see a champion within your reps that can really like
Mm.
is involved in that process change?
Sure. It could be extremely beneficial, just like in any sort of sales environment, right? Where you get your
Yes.
champion who can sell it internally. Um, the champions are usually like a lot more helpful than they are harmful in those particular cases. And oftentimes, and I tend to look for these when rolling out a new process, is not only a champion, but also an early adopter, one who's like interested
Okay.
and curious, naturally curious, and isn't just so focused on like I need to hit my number, leave me alone, let me sell sort of thing. Because like you're gonna run into like both of those personalities. So certainly having those that you interact with a bit more frequently than others on the team, I think would certainly help in the adoption process. Because there are going to be conversations where you're not in the room, and if like you have some sort of advocate that can be there for you, uh, of course that's going to be helpful for you.
Okay. Brilliant. And what are the key considerations for successful long-term adoption in that case?
Um, yeah. So not only like having your internal champion or like your early adopters in there, uh, giving your reps or like the people you serve, let's phrase it as that,
Yeah.
a voice and a channel to voice their voice. And what I mean by that
Mhm.
is gather their feedback, listen to their concerns or their complaining, and let them know, like help them understand that they are being heard. Because that's areas where I've run into trouble in the past, especially with adoption, where I might have in my early tenure there, I might have had them on board with like trying these new processes, but they didn't feel like they were being heard in terms of the feedback loop, and that's like always important for sure. So once they feel like they're not being heard anymore, then you kind of lose your audience to a degree, and like the next time you need a new process adopted or a new technology adopted, you're just not going to get that same level of support. So like being available to take that feedback, letting them know that they're heard, having that early adopter and having a champion can certainly help the longevity of any sort of process that you have out there.
Could you give me a real life example of a time where you've listened and made sure that a rep has been heard and you've made an adaptation based on that?
Hmm. Yeah. So drawing from recent memory, when I joined this organization about a year ago, there was a pretty intensive data entry process in order for a sales process to kick off. To speak more directly, in Salesforce, there were a lot of fields that needed to be filled out when an opportunity was created. A very simple example. And in looking through like the information that needed to be collected, there were a lot of feedback, especially early on, that a lot of this stuff is unnecessary. Like the reps were telling me, a lot of this stuff is unnecessary. Um,
Okay.
and while listening to that, yeah, you might be right, but like I did some investigating on my end, and like determined that like these processes were put in place years ago. I went back to the reps and I provided them the information that I found by asking internally, like, why are we collecting this information? Where is it used? Where is it stored? And getting like a complete picture. And I went back to them and said, hey, I hear you on this particular issue, or like these fields not being necessary or related to anything. And like the simple thing like there was either changing a field type or it went from a free text to a drop down list or a pick list, or completely eliminating them from the forms themselves. So like drastically cutting down the data entry portion of them, creating an opportunity, as well as automating other pieces of it. Let them know that like, hey, your process that you go through today is very drawn out and very manual, and here's a new thing that, while it looks a little bit different and we're asking you to do a little bit different things, we're automating some pieces of that. We removed or we trimmed the fat in some areas, and more importantly, going forward, we're going to continue to refine that a bit, remove more fields. It's not going to happen today. It's not the first project that I'm going to tackle while I'm here, but like in this quarter, giving them a time frame, this is when we're going to revisit it and do some more trimming or adjustments to it. So it let them know that like I heard the concerns as to why it's time consuming and why it's unnecessary. I made some quick wins, or I put out some quick wins there to make some quick changes. And I set the stage where like we're going to come back to this and make more adjustments. But that's not going to happen at this particular time. That's going to be in the future.
Nice. So listening doesn't always mean, okay, we'll scrap it. Forget about the rollout. We'll scrap it. Listening means kind of, okay, I appreciate your point. I'll look into that, and genuinely looking into that and coming up for a reason why. Okay, you granted some of your comments are true here, but this is ultimately why it benefits you, and you found that to be a lot better than kind of being strong-headed and being like, no, it all works. It all works.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that yeah, that certainly, at least in my experience, that certainly
Yeah.
worked a little bit better. There may be a personality thing that comes into play as well, where like I never necessarily imparted my will on folks that way, where like this is the way,
Yes.
like coming in as the knowledge expert or subject matter expert is the word I was looking for, where like I've seen and like I've gotten this feedback before where like if you just tell them like you've seen this or you experienced this challenge before and this is the path forward. um, I haven't really tried that aspect of it yet, and I think that's an interesting way of going about it. I just get concerned that if you try that tactic and you try to strong arm them to do something based on your expertise, um, I have concerns that that could backfire, or that could kind of flip your credibility into being complete garbage. Quite frankly, if you're proven to be a fraud in a way. Does that make sense?
Yeah. 100%. 100%. I like that. And my last question would be, what is one thing that might not be so obvious that's super important to successful adoption of processes?
Hmm. Um, it's funny. Like I think this is an obvious and a not so obvious one, and it comes down to documentation. So like
Okay.
not just for your own benefit, right, of documenting your processes, but it'll save you time in troubleshooting. It'll save you time when people come to you and hit you on Slack or Teams or whatever at 3 in the morning saying they're trying to do something, if you could point to a documentation or like a knowledge base, that'll save you a lot of headaches and a lot of time. It'll help in onboarding new reps. It'll help keep historical record. So like 3 years down the road, when you look at this one automated process that you built, like, why did I build this sort of thing? This is what it's for. So like documentation is the obvious one, but I think the reasons why documentation is so important isn't so obvious.